Hi everyone. Before the interview, a few sentences of introduction. Jim is an awesome guy and he agreed to have a quick video chat with me. During this video, you will see some new Lamentations of the Flame Princess books coming up soon, but unfortunately, after we saved the video recording, Skype cuts some of the Jim's camera portion and the books are not fully visible. Sorry, Jim. I will provide a link in the video description to Jim's video where he is covering new releases and showing them, so if you are interested in seeing them, go to the link and watch Jim talking about his new products. Secondly, during this almost 40 minutes conversation, we had 2 or 3 lags and there might be some voice issues that are no longer than 5 seconds. Now let me switch to Polish for a short Polish introduction and you will see the interview after. Cześć wszystkim. Udało mi się umówić na wywiad z Jimem Ragim, wydawcą Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Jest on w całości po angielsku i choć planowałem na początku zrobić do tego polskie napisy, to jest to dla mnie zdecydowanie zbyt dużo pracy i czasu, na które nie mogę sobie niestety w chwili obecnej pozwolić. Mam nadzieję, że mi to wybaczycie, a wideo wam się spodoba.
I think it started.
Yes, it says it is recording the call.
Okay, so hi Jim.
Hello.
Thanks for agreeing to participate this short Q&A. I wanted to talk about a little bit about Lamentations and your plan for this year, but I think we can start with a short introduction of yourself. If you could say a few words about you and your RPG history, that would be awesome.
Okay, I am James Edward Raggi IV. I'm an American living in Finland, and I run Lamentations of the Flame Princess. What's the crappy marketing tagline? The mind-bending and merciless role-playing game. We started in 2009. We're somehow still going and don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
So 2020 is going on a berserk mode right now, and it seems that things are going really crazy, but how are things going at Lamentations? Are you guys, did it by any means stop your plans or cripple them, or are you going full speed?
Well, 2020 has been interesting. Everything is going haywire. We do have a number of releases still planned for later this year, maybe either a little later this month or early next month. We've got 4 new books coming out, plus new merchandise, and then we've got a number of things planned for late in the fall. So who knows how things will turn out, but we've put all of our eggs in these baskets, so stuff is going to be happening. Whether that's a success or not in light of this very normal, calm year remains to be seen.
So, can you tell a little bit more about the new books? I saw your live stream, but I think that maybe not everyone have seen it, and maybe a little bit details.
Okay, we've got Big Puppet that will be coming out.
This is the one I want to get really, really bad.
Yeah, so we got that. You see, it's difficult. It's difficult to actually give a lot of details because you never know if it's players or referees that are, watching the stream. And to really sell it to the referees, you're going to ruin the experience for the players. Yeah. So it's very difficult, but the tagline for this isn't a game and it never was.
So is this an adventure?
This isn't. Well, it is an adventure, but the way it's set up and the way it introduces things, there's an entire faction with their own. Well, I see. I don't want to give it. It's an entire faction with their own goodies that don't have to be limited to the adventure. So there's like a source book inside the adventure. Okay. So the things of the adventure don't have to just be this adventure. And then let's see, we've got the The book with a Latin title. I just call this Fermentum because I never remember all the Latin, and I never remember what the Latin stands for. At some point I was told, and I was like, yeah, it's the Fermentum book. Another fancy-ass book with a nice foil and cloth binding and blind stamping, and I should have previewed some of the insides of the other one, but just top of the line, top grade production. This is another adventure about just to sum up roughly, monks are brewing beer and something is odd in this situation. So that's the basic setup, and well, this one involves the theater. So just do a brief kind of page through of that's text, So yeah, it's very professional. And then let's see, my own work, the Deck of Weird Things. We're doing, 2 versions, one with just the book, and then the premium fancy-ass slipcase with foil there.
This slipcase looks like a hardcover, yes. So.
Yeah, yeah. It's not a flimsy little paper or cardboard thing. It's made of the same material, same thickness as the book covers. And then the last of the regular releases, we've got the last of our adventure anthologies, Adventure Anthology Blood, that this reprints some of the earliest Lamentations of the Flame Princess adventures that have been out of print for almost 10 years. Hammers of the God, Grinding Gear, No Dignity in Death, People of Pembertonshire, and Weird New World. It's all new design, or all new layout, graphic design, over 250 pieces of new art, all brand new art. And it also includes poster maps. So yeah, deluxe stuff. We're really going all in on the physical construction of the products. Yeah. There's lots of business reasons besides that, behind that, but wherever you want to take the interview, I can talk about that or talk about other things. Whatever.
I wanted to talk about the adventures, about basically the line of the products that you are having, because you guys, or you, because I don't know how big is the team of LOTFP. Is it just a solo Jim or?
I've got a couple of full-timers that I pay, but as far as management goes, it's just me.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the line of products that you are having through all of the years, because it's a very specific line, because basically whenever people think of a game, they think of either of a system or either of a setting. And I would say, from my experience and from what I read and ran of Lamentations, that this is not the case with you, because you put the experience of people playing the game above everything else. And I wanted to ask maybe if this is a pattern, or I am mistaking something, or is there a strategy regarding the product line?
I don't know if strategy is the right word, but to me, when I'm evaluating submissions, I'm looking for a certain atmosphere, a certain thing that the game will do with the players. It's not any sort of mechanical special mechanical qualities. I'm very much a fan of just create a new subsystem. Who gives a shit? And if it integrates well, I mean, that's one of the strengths of the OSR systems. They're made of these individual little parts that don't necessarily directly connect with each other. So you can just take one, throw it out, substitute in something you saw on the internet, and the whole thing's going to work just as well. It's incredibly loose. And then as far as the setting, some of our stuff, I like setting stuff in the early 17th century on Earth, but a lot of the stuff really isn't specific like that. Not that many of the products actually, center that kind of setting, and there's plenty of stuff we've released that doesn't fit Earth too much, especially like the stuff that I'm, just reprinted in Blood. Like Weird New World is all about trying to find the Northwest Passage, but I hadn't focused on Earth yet, so it's this completely fictional Arctic, wilderness area. So yeah, it's. I like to pay lip service to the greater ideas and how it fits as a product line. I'll pay lip service to that, but the most important thing is always the product at hand and what it's trying to do.
Yeah, because also about the products of yours, because the adventures that you are producing, they are not like adventures that you go through from point A to point B. They are always open-ended, and this is something very different that, for example, I also read and run with 5th edition. So this is there also any idea of when you get the ideas for the adventures, or where people are I don't know, asking for you to support their project, do you want everything to be open-ended, or because you don't have this like adventures from point A to point B, here's the experience you're going to have, and you never also say in your products that this is the experience you're going to have, but this is what is going on, show players into it, and let's see what's going to happen. So
yeah, if I can read something and I can figure out what the experience is going to be from beginning to end, it's crap. I don't want it. Not going to touch it. I say that. There's probably that's not exactly true, because again, there's always going to be exceptions. I'll get handed something and it's an A to B experience, but it's like, wow, it'll have other things going on that I'll say, okay, we'll go with this. Especially like, again, the earlier stuff that's being reprinted. Some of those dungeon crawls are very point A to point B, and it's not about this is the experience you're going to have. It's about me wanting to find out, how the player is going to handle this. It's a situation, it's a place, and if you go through it, especially a dungeon adventure, it's like you pretty much know in a dungeon, you got point A to point B, and then you'll have a choice C or D, but there's a finite number of places you can go, and you can guess, you can figure out what's going to happen. But then I like throwing in what I call chaos bombs, stuff that will panic a referee. A referee's going to read this and say, I don't know what's going to happen. How am I going to handle this? Well, yes. If that kind of situation isn't in there, then what are you using a purchased gaming supplement for? If you want the idea of, okay, I want the control of how everything is and what the consequences are going to be, then why aren't you just using your own stuff? That's the whole point of pulling from someone else's stuff, is you're going outside your comfort zone. You're going outside your own imagination. And so you'd better be getting something that's not exactly what you wanted, just done by someone else. And so in addition to what the situation is, there's also the factor of, oh my God, is this going to screw up my whole campaign? Because again, my thought about campaigns are the same as adventures. You shouldn't know where you're going. Every adventure, every session you play should have the possibility of derailing everything, or else it's going to be like one of those TV shows that's like a full season TV show that has a story arc from beginning to end, but there's always like some episode or two where it's just like, this is completely unnecessary to the story, and they just put this filler in here because they need to fill out 13 or 20 episodes. And so if you have a campaign plan and you want an adventure that you can slot into the middle that won't affect the campaign plan, you're making one of those filler episodes.
Yeah.
So what you do is, every session you play should potentially disrupt, not necessarily destroy, but disrupt everything. And so where you thought you were going isn't where you're going, because, oh, look at all this that happened. Maybe we want to pursue this stuff, and this thing we thought was so important for the past 2 months of real-time gameplay. Let's follow this because it's more interesting, and you shouldn't know that before you actually play. And the adventure should be constructed. Like, one thing I like to do with Lamentations is that once you're done playing the adventure, you're not actually done playing the adventure, because there's going to be consequences and things that happen. And so long after you're finished playing the adventure, you're still playing the adventure because the consequences are following you. It affects the campaign.
Exactly. I wanted to interrupt you with one thing, because
okay.
this is my experience. Because with every single Lamentations adventure, I think that it never ends actually, because there is always a follow-up, and there is always stuff happening because of the adventure. So basically, there is no end of the adventure, only the end of the book. So, and not the adventure itself.
And once you have that mindset, the fun, whether you're using Lamentation stuff or you're just doing your own stuff for your group that has that same mentality, once you decide, okay, this is how I'm going to do things, the fun then doesn't become one individual adventure. The fun happens when all of the consequences of all these adventures that you're playing over time start running into each other. Because you're considering, when you make one thing on its own, you're thinking these consequences, and you're thinking, okay, I know where it's going to go. But you do that 2 or 3 times, and you can't think of how how everything's going to intersect and what's going to happen when this one element that may or may not be a lasting consequence of adventure A runs into this thing that you didn't know was going to be a consequence of adventure C, and then they run into each other, and then you've got a whole new thing that came from the books or came from your adventure, but it's a whole new thing that becomes independent from. And to me, that's exciting. It completely makes long-term planning of a campaign completely useless, completely silly. And that's all to the good, I think, because if you already know where you're going, then what is the point of actually playing? Games shouldn't be the same as a plotted novel or a movie or a TV series. It's this whole thing where you're walking the tightrope with no net, and you can't see the platform that you're walking towards. and that's what it is. That's the joy, especially fantasy adventuring or horror fantasy. I mean, even standard fantasy, even though it's portrayed as heroic and good versus evil, there's so much horrifying shit that's going on. Lamentations just pushes that to the front. There's so much horrific shit going on that it's, I don't know, and you get to deal with it. You get to, either fight it or just explore it or maybe join up with it. And because it's all just in an imagined space, it's pure thought exercise. There's no real world consequence to whether you wipe out the orc village or negotiate a peace or join the orc village and because the humans are assholes. Everything's open, and the only thing you're risking is the continuity and canon of this shared story space. That's it. And if you don't like it, you just walk away. And it's like, that it's like, oh yeah. It's like saying when a TV show goes bad, it's like, well, did you have fun watching it with your friends? Did you have fun playing the game with your friends, even if the game didn't turn out the way you want? Then good game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you told, I think, a very good thing with that. It's boring when you know how the adventure will end. So, because I see that a lot of adventures recently are written in this manner, that here you have the boss on the cover, this is the end experience, and have fun, guys, on the journey. But like I said, not the case with Lamentations. And one thing you are also known for, and the whole Lamentations line, are the world-bending events. I think no one else does it, because you have your famous summon spell in the rule book that can mess up the world, and also events like summoning very powerful entities to the world that are changing the course of the campaign. This is also something you are searching for when you are, I don't know, starting a project, or I don't know.
Well, once you establish that you have magic and that it bends the laws of reality, and that there are, demons or extra dimensional beings, whatever you want to call them, it's like, okay, what are the consequences of that? What can happen? It's like in a superhero game, it's like, okay, villains always want to take over the world. There's always an alien invasion. It has to be on the table. And for me, one of the wonderful things is your standard D&D world where magic is accepted and just part of the world. I can't make those worlds make sense. So I like, I best think of it as the Lovecraftian model. Like H.P. Lovecraft wrote pretty much all of his stories on Earth. There's just stuff hidden away. And consequences. And of course, the stories are about the hidden things, but most people are just going on in life, and you don't have to worry about how the world works because the hidden, the important stuff for story purposes is like sort of in a corner. Now, in a role-playing game, in a campaign, that stuff may burst out into the world. And then you deal with it, but you're dealing with it from that initial burst, and so you decide how that's going to make sense for your world. You're not introduced to a world where, oh, the gods exist and everyone knows about them and there are monsters and there's magic, and then here's the place that governs like medieval monarchy, and then here's your little medieval village, and it's just like, how does any of that shit go together? It doesn't. How does this? Makes no sense. But then you get a thing like Eberron, which is specifically designed to address all that. And it's like, okay, if this is what the world, if these are the things that are in the world, this is one possibility of what a world would actually look like. But then you're basically playing a science fiction alien world game that has no connection to the real world, which is fine, but that's not what most people are signing up for when they're wanting to play a fantasy role-playing game.
Yeah.
So in order to not take that approach, well, I take a different approach that's not the mainstream fantasy thing either. So it's, even Lord of the Rings, that I think maybe not this generation, but every previous generation thought of as the primary inspiration for fantasy role-playing. Your humans aren't in contact with all of the world-bending powers. When the dwarves ran into the Balrog, they didn't deal with it. When they ran into Smaug, they didn't deal with it. They just fucking left. They ran or they died. And so then there's no world where everybody knows about this stuff, or not everyone's encountering it. It's still atomized where the Riders of Rohan have their culture, which sort of kind of resembles something from historical Earth. And it makes sense because all this crazy shit that's actually in Middle Earth isn't yet at their doorstep. It's not all integrated. In Bree, the people are scared of the Dark Riders, and they don't know what the Dark Riders are. And if they did know what they were, their civilization, their corner of civilization, would not be what it is. They don't know what it is. It's superstitious, but they keep to themselves. And that's why when the hobbits go into Bree, you recognize what Bree is. And you don't have to be told all the different things. You understand what it is because it is isolated from all the crazy shit. So, Lamentations as a default, of course, the adventures are going to be about the crazy shit. But if you base it in a world that is grounded, or the real world historically, where it's not integrated with the crazy shit, you don't have to explain the world, and you don't leave the questions of how does this work? This makes no sense.
Yeah. So basically, you make also about the world. You make also things easier, setting them on the real world, because it's much easier to imagine.
I know. Actually, the feedback I get is more difficult to imagine, because if somebody wants to set their game on Middle Earth or the Forgotten Realms or in Greyhawk, they're not as nervous. They don't feel like they're doing something wrong if they screw up the details. Whereas in the real world, if you're deciding, okay, my game's happening in 1630 and the characters roll up, people feel if they get some historical detail wrong that they've actually committed some real offense against the real world. I mean, I remember one time after taking a trip to Crete, I decided, one option was for the players or going someplace they can go through Crete. And I assume, just from looking at one of those maps of the advance of the Ottoman Empire, that all of the land on both sides of the Mediterranean around Crete, from the time period we were playing, was already, under Ottoman control. So I figured that was too. But as it turned out, after the session where they spent time in Ottoman-controlled Crete, in the real world, the Ottomans weren't going to control it, for another 20, 30 years. So it's like, oops. But you just deal with it and move on. It's like, well, that's different. Move on. And I don't feel that, maybe somebody from Crete, if they were in the game, would have felt different. But it's like, okay, I got a detail wrong. But again, you're playing a game, Oops. That's how I look at it.
So I also I have to admit that it was also some kind of a blocker for me to start playing in the real world, that I was really afraid that I will have to read this mass of historical books to even start to playing Lamentations. That was the first thing. And second thing that came to my mind was, this is lame. That historical events are lame, but not exactly. When you go a little bit deeper into this, right now I am preparing a campaign during English Civil War, also using the England Upturned. So this is really a fun time to play a campaign in.
Yeah, and what I like about England Upturned is it highlights a lot of the different factions and a lot of the. And yeah, it's fascinating if you dig in, if you take any historical period, any historical situation, especially a time of crisis, and you dig in, it's never boring. It's just, people watch the news today, and depending on what they themselves think, they're going to be thinking from whatever angle, what are people thinking? The wonderful thing about history, especially when you go back, a few hundred years, you read it and it's, oh my God, all of these people were insane. Every single one of them. Every side, I don't understand why they're thinking what they're thought. And to me, it creates a good distance. Like, if you try, I couldn't imagine trying to play a game of like modern day espionage and then we're actually worrying about how you portray China or how you portray Saudi Arabia or Russia or even Germany. And there's just so much there. There's so much there. And people are going to look at you sideways. It's like, oh, you think that about those people? But you're yeah, but your Cavaliers versus Roundheads, it's like, what the fuck? These people, I don't, fuck. It's a little easier just to look at everything for what it was.
Yeah. And right now, when I was started to play in historical setting, that this is really, really fun, and especially it's really inspirational. I think that people are underestimating it, that it's inspirational. But like I said, when first I saw it, because we have this group that we play in, and my friend, he introduced us to Lamentations, and first when we saw it, I thought like, this is lame. So I think that this is the main blocker that stops people playing Lamentations, that they see the rules, they see the 17th century, but they don't see the adventures. So, and I also wanted to ask you, would you think that this is something that if people would overcome, then they would have really a lot of fun playing Lamentations or using their adventures even with a different system?
Yeah, well, my advantage is, doing horror fantasy. The time period that I use, I chose because I think that's the worst time to have ever been alive. No matter who you are, no matter where on Earth you are, life sucks. Whereas any other time, there were periods of, if you go earlier than that, of course, life isn't great. But there were periods of peace and stability where you know who's who and what's what for, the kind of life you're going to have, which may only be in a very small area, and that's what your life is. But the combination of, colonialism and emergent capitalism and, famine and plague and religious wars, there's nowhere you can be where you can just have the life that your father and mother expected that you would have when you were born. You can't have that anywhere. Whether it, oh God, I hope I'm not mixing this up, but the problem with the Russian rulers in the early 17th century and what the fuck, I'm worried I'm misremembering the name of that with the Forgotten Realms thing, so I'll just not label it. The 30 Years' War that affected, all of Central and Eastern Europe. Even if you go, China's got all sorts of shit going on. Japan's going through major changes. There's nowhere to be where things aren't going completely to shit and the world's not changing. And that's a perfect place to hide strange things out in the corners. So there's drama in town. So hell, maybe facing the 12 tentacled thing in the cave is actually calmer. And yeah, so there's always something going on, always something like a good recent example, the remake of Suspiria.
Yeah.
How they set that in Berlin and how historical events for the time period are actually affecting what's going on with the witches.
Yeah.
It all interconnects, and to my absolute amazement, the Suspiria remake was great. And I had some problems with it, but
I think it was a little bit too long. A little bit too long.
And then when they brought back the actress, Jessica Harper,
yeah,
it took me out of the movie because I wasn't seeing the character she was supposed to be playing. I was seeing the intentional callback to the previous movie, and it's like, you're taking me out of the movie. Stop it. But yes, I can complain about anything. But it was overall.
I know the feeling.
Way more good than bad, and the way they integrated the historical setting and goings on into the supernatural narrative was great, and a perfect example of what I try to accomplish with Lamentations by putting it in the historical real world.
Okay, just one note that sometimes we break a little bit with the video, so Skype quality might be a little bit off. So just for you to be aware that we might not look great. So but hey.
The fuzzier the picture, the better I look.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to ask one more thing, because this is something that I'm really curious. What is the creative process of making a Lamentations book? Because you guys are doing a really great job above everyone else with the physical quality of the product, and I don't want to bore you about the questions, because I'm pretty much sure that everyone is asking you about the physical quality, so maybe let's skip it. But I wanted to ask about the content-wise. where or how is the idea born? Is it like yours idea and you are asking someone to write an adventure for you, or are people coming with an adventure towards you? How is it going, and how do you pick your projects?
I would say most of the time someone is pitching me an idea. And I'm looking for like the open-endedness, the kind of the potential for mischief, where it's not just going to be the same kind of adventure that people expect. It'll have something different in it. And if it's something that sparks my curiosity that I suspect the public will see as wrong, I'm drawn to that stuff just because of my own background and fandom of, underground heavy metal and trauma films, underground horror and schlock kind of stuff. Just that pure joy of not giving a shit that way. It's like, I know this is passé. This is like 1980s kind of rebellion, but upside down cross. But I mean, well, but even that, my information might be a little wrong or outdated, but like, Poland, doesn't that still have blasphemy laws? Because I know heavy metal artists have run into things. I mean, doing a little more than just putting an upside down cross on their album cover.
Yeah,
but
we had Behemoth tearing apart the Bible on the stage, and they have like the thing is in court. I think.
Yeah. So even things that that's so 80s, being satanic heavy metal, it's might still be very much a thing in different territories. And I live in Finland, so the concerns here are going to be different than what they are in the US. The norms and what people think is shocking. And I get orders. I know people are ordering from all over the place. And somebody orders from like Turkey. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on in Turkey. What if officials in Turkey start opening stuff, customs inspection? I have no idea what the laws are there now. Is this gonna, or even in Poland's not gonna have the customs inspection, but you hear horrible things about Russia, about what some of the laws are. So it's like, because I don't know if this is a real thing, that buying role-playing books might get someone in trouble with the law if customs inspects the packages. That's I don't know if it's realistic, but it's not an impossible concern I have with some of my fans around the world. Yeah. I mean, it shouldn't have been a problem in the 80s in the United States. Everyone freaking out. Oh my God, Johnson & Johnson has a moon and stars on their baby powder. They're Satan. That shouldn't have been a problem then. And, for all these places that are still making a big deal about that, it shouldn't be a problem now. But yeah, I forget if I had a point to wrap that up in a bow with, but maybe you get what I'm.
Yeah, definitely. So we wanted to schedule a call for like 30-40 minutes. So to not steal you more time, just wanted to ask you one last question. What's your favorite Lamentations cover?
Favorite cover?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I just whatever one I name, as soon as we disconnect, I'm going to be like, no. I'm going to name the cover of the current edition of the Random Esoteric Creature Generator for God, I forgot the full friggin' name, for classic fantasy role-playing games and their modern simulacra. I think it's classic, not traditional. That's where I was hanging up. But yeah, I think the cover of that, with like the stag mantis woman beast that's looking up at the Borealis, with severed heads at her feet. And it's like, nailed it. Fucking nailed it.
And this is also my favorite cover. I recently got the book. It's really great. It's awesome, really. And I would also name a second place, the Punchline. I really like this one as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so to wrap it up, again, thank you very much for having your time, because I know you're a busy man, especially with the products coming up and also your stream that is coming today, Europe, late evening, I would say, even night.
Yeah, well, I decided to do something that at least some Americans can get in on this time.
Yeah, you have to remember about US, definitely. Yeah. So again, thanks, and maybe one last request. How would you encourage people to play OSR in like 1 or 2 sentences?
Anything is possible. The entire point of playing is to find out.
Okay, sounds like fun.
Well, that's convincing. What a ringing endorsement. That sounds like fun. No, it's an exploration and not a packaged experience. Is that better?
Yeah, because I remember when you were having a stream recently, and I told you that I was there, and I told you that I am having a Lamentations game in 30 minutes, and you told me that whenever there's a button, push it, and whenever there's a lever, pull it.
Yeah.
So that game, my character died. So.
Just as I.
So thanks. Thanks. All right. So yeah, I will stop the recording now.